your brain is fixed, stuck in its ways and unchangeable? Think again.
I'm genuinely shocked that my brain could change overnight.
My name is Dr. Jack Lewis. I'm a neuroscientist and on a journey to meet people with incredible brains.
Your brain is extraordinary.
With my magician friend, Mr. Pete Heat, I want to explore the most vital of vital organs.
I've got my teenage brain back.
This episode, I meet an extraordinary man who's living proof that brains can rebuild after injury.
Whoa, couldn't walk, couldn't talk.
He's a real testament to the power of the brain to be able to recover.
And then I'll be trying to rewire my own brain.
25,000 streets and roads.
Can an old dog learn new tricks?
This is not good.
Are you ready to learn how to change your brain?
What?
Join me to uncover the secrets of the brain. Now, whilst it pains me to admit it, I'm not a young man anymore. Could that be bad news for my brain? For centuries, science and medicine thought that over the course of childhood, the connections in our brain form, become fixed, and thereafter all that really changes is a gradual loss of brain cells. All doom and gloom, really. But is that really the case?
Happily, all is not lost. Recent research has uncovered that even adult brains retain the amazing ability to change in response to what we spend our time actually doing. It's called neuroplasticity, and it's completely changed our understanding of how our brains develop.
It relates to the brain's ability to change and to adapt. And in fact, the brain's incredibly complex, it's incredibly powerful, but one of the really cool things it can do is it can change its structure, its chemistry, and its function over time. And this is really great because you might get a brain injury and there's potential for recovery. You may, obviously learning, you need to create new things. And this adaptability in the brain is really crucial to how we live our lives.
But how do you get a brain, and a body for that matter, to rebuild? Well, one man who believes you're never too old to learn a new trick is our resident magician, Mr. Pete Heat. Pete's a big believer that our brains and bodies have the remarkable ability to heal themselves, even in the blink of an eye.
Have you been injured recently in any way? Anything where you've needed medical attention?
No.
Have you been injured or ill or anything recently?
It's just ligament damage in my elbow.
The body heals itself pretty magically, pretty quickly, doesn't it?
No, I was out for a while.
Okay, yeah. But yeah, you didn't know me then. Can I ask you to draw for me? Can you draw a little stick figure? So just like literally just a circle for the head, just a big, just a stick man. And the reason I asked about injuries and stuff is because the human body is really, really good at healing itself. So we're going to do something that you might not like. Sorry.
Ouch.
Okay. Right through. Okay. Like I say, it's good at healing itself. It's,
What?
So there's no hole at all, right?
No.
Check it out. There's no hole, right?
No.
Can I try one more thing with that?
Yeah.
Let's take that a step further, right? Sorry about this, but that's a real rip, right?
Yeah.
That's a genuine.
Yeah, totally.
I'm going to try this. If I fold the pieces up and sort of crease them, hopefully this will work. As you unfold them, if I can.
Shut up. What? That's amazing. That's crazy. Oh my god.
Oh, you're cured.
There you go, you're safe. There you go, you can keep that.
I've never seen anything like that in front of my eye.
I was watching his hands very closely, and the pen went straight through. Pen came straight back out. There was no kind of sleight of hand, or there's nothing in his palms.
He's done a lot of cruel things to it, and it's fine now.
Now, I should reassure you that no stick men were actually harmed in the making of that trick. So whilst that was a little bit of fun, how our fragile and finely tuned brains can recover from even serious injury is at the heart of some of the most incredible revelations in modern neuroscience.
And there's one extraordinary young man who's helping us to challenge preconceptions about what happens to our brain after trauma. In the early hours of New Year's Day 2010, 21-year-old Jack Martindale's life was turned upside down. Jack was left in a coma, his skull shattered into 30 pieces after he and his friends were hit by a car that had careered off the road. On a scale of 1 to 15, Jack's coma was rated 3, the lowest point at which you can have a chance of survival. In fact, in some cases, it's another definition for being dead. Specialists knew that this kind of head injury could be fatal.
The scans we have just aren't able to detect what's happened, so it's not to say that there wasn't a lot of damage to Jack's brain at the time, because there clearly was. It was a big accident.
Jack woke from his coma in April 2010, unable to walk, talk, or eat. When doctors tried to test his memory, he could only identify objects in French. He had no idea how old he was, and he was shocked that his parents were so young. Jack had suffered a diffuse axonal head injury, which left him with severe ataxia, which affects muscle coordination and speech, and amnesia. By all accounts, the medical team were doubtful about his ability to recover. But what happened next astounded the scientific community. I'm about to meet him 7 years on, and I have absolutely no idea what to expect.
Hey, Jack, how you doing? Wow, you're in good shape. It's quite impressive to see you bounding along like that. What do you remember?
Wow, I certainly wasn't expecting this. Now let's put this in context. That Jack survived the accident at all is by all accounts a miracle. Doctors thought it unlikely he'd ever be able to walk, talk, or live an independent life ever again. I'm absolutely fascinated to know how and why he's been able to make such an incredible recovery.
You took quite a hit on the head, didn't you? Your face was really smashed up.
It was complete and utter carnage, probably is the best way to describe the event. And yeah, bleak. Even if it was in a horror film, I think it was a bit far-fetched.
What did you think the first time you looked in a mirror?
I wrote a vague little story, like, pass me the mirror, like, in the bed, just to get an idea of who I was. I looked like a hamster, and the swelling was so severe.
Jack's skull had been completely crushed on one side. He needed 9 titanium plates and 33 screws to piece it back together. But I want to find out how his brain responded to the trauma.
What kind of abilities had you lost?
I couldn't walk, couldn't talk. I couldn't even sit up in bed.
What about your memory?
Yeah, it was gone. Coming out of a coma is not like that. And that took a long time.
Now I know that the longer you're in a coma, the worse the outcome is likely to be. Jack's accident left his memory and speech permanently affected. But what he's gone on to do is absolutely extraordinary.
I mean, it's an absolutely remarkable recovery. What aspect are you most proud of?
I think my graduation was actually the thing that really brought it all together and almost symbolised sort of a slight closing of this little chapter. You know what I mean? And I've written a book, which I think was a nice welcome release. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. Congratulations.
Battling the brain injury, the life that Jack built.
So, what's next? What are your plans from here on?
Well, now I'm doing a TED Talk.
Great. So, do you know how your brain has managed to recover? Do you know what's going on in there?
I don't know. I never did neuroscience, so I've got no idea. I'm not going to be pretending.
Would you like to find out?
Yeah, definitely about time.
Lovely to meet you, Jack.
You too, Jack.
Absolute pleasure. You are genuinely an inspiration.
Oh, thank you.
I think that his recovery is nothing short of a miracle. But the question is, how has his brain done it? What is going on inside his skull? There's only one way to find out.
Coming up, Jack meets a specialist who may be able to shed light on his amazing recovery.
This is one of your brain scans from shortly after your injury.
But first, there's a very simple challenge that shows plasticity in action, illustrating that some of our brains may be more plastic than others.
Riding a bike. It's one of those things where once you've learned how to do it, you never forget. But what happens if you change a fundamental piece of bike functionality? This bike here has been fitted with a special gear system, which means if you steer right, you go left. And if you steer left, you go right.
When we cycle, our brains are effortlessly doing huge amounts of mental gymnastics, processing sensory information from our eyes, arms, legs, and inner ear, all while simultaneously coordinating our muscle movements. Change one critical factor, and all of that skill counts for nothing.
You might find the steering is a little bit unorthodox.
Usually these guys are ludicrously good on a bike, but it looks like they're struggling just as much as I was.
Oh, right.
The backward steering has undone decades of riding experience.
It's a completely new way of kind of riding it.
How long do you reckon it'd take you to master this? You've had a couple of minutes.
It'd probably take me about a couple of weeks.
Now this may look like just a bit of fun, but there's a serious point. Any skills we possess, like riding a bike, depend heavily on the conditions our brain is used to dealing with remaining constant. When they change, our brains can struggle to adapt. But it can get there eventually.
As we learn new skills, we go through a number of different stages. There's fast learning, then there's more consolidation, and then ultimately there's automaticity. A behaviour becomes so natural and normal for us. And in the brain, depending on what you're learning, you see different systems being recruited. Sometimes it will be much kind of broader, more effortful to begin with. But as it becomes more automatic, you might see changes to more subcortical representations.
Now I've set the owner of this frankly ridiculous bike a challenge. Can he teach his old dad how to ride it? And if so, how long will it take him to adapt? I'll be back later to see how they get on. If a simple change like this can completely undo something as simple as, well, riding a bike, what about if we move the goalposts for the visual brain? What happens when I flip the world upside down so that what's above is actually below, and vice versa?
You made that one so beautifully, but see if you can do the same again, but wearing these.
These hand-engineered goggles have been used to explore the brain's ability to adapt.
Oh, wow.
Feeling confident?
No.
What are you looking for?
The wafers.
In the upside-down goggles experiment, we're seeing an example of the brain very rapidly remapping some of the connections between the visual input and other senses, such as balance. This sort of demonstrates that plasticity can happen quite quickly.
It's remarkable.
Now, I'm not suggesting for a moment that you'd actually want to purchase the end result, but even in a relatively short period of time, my ice cream makers do begin to improve. Kind of.
Can you imagine being able to do your job whilst wearing those?
No, walking was hard enough for me. Yeah.
Roughly, how long would you guess it takes a brain to flip the world the right way up again, just naturally, without any effort?
A month or two.
What about you?
Maybe like 2 to 3.
I think you did an absolutely smashing job, and given the choice between the two, I'll take this.
After wearing these goggles or riding that bike for an intense but relatively short period of time, it's remarkable that our brains can adapt. They have a plasticity that is carefully deployed to help us adjust our abilities and get the job done.
So when we refer to a brain being plastic, what we mean is it has the adaptability to change when it is required, but it's also strong enough to not, change and be flexible when it shouldn't happen.
So, back to our father and son bike riders. Has the owner of this disobedient bike been able to pass on the skills needed to ride it to his dad?
How old were you when you learnt to ride this bike?
2 years, yeah.
So
11.
11 years old?
Yeah.
And how long did it take you?
About 10, 15 minutes.
What? 10 or 15 minutes?
Yeah.
That's extraordinary. And how about you?
I haven't learned yet. It's work in progress.
You can ride it, you can't. How'd you explain that?
Because I'm not old.
If this morning of mayhem has proven anything, it's that younger brains are, generally, much quicker at adapting to new challenges than the old. That said, everyone gets there eventually. Could this super flexibility of the younger brain be part of the reason Jack Martindale was able to make his amazing recovery? And where does this leave the rest of us? Coming up, I'll be challenged to see just how much I can adapt my brain to meet the demands of a very demanding job. Pete wants to challenge your brain's neuroplasticity. Learning and remembering actions, or motor skills as we neuroscientists like to call them, is key to our daily lives. He's got 3 very simple skills he wants you to learn whilst you're watching this episode. First up, can you balance a coin on your nose? Easy, yeah? Second, what about balancing a coin on your forearm and then catching it in your hand? Not quite so easy. Thirdly, how about rolling a coin over the back of your fingers? Now things really are starting to get tricky. Now this last one links nicely to recent studies showing that with enough practice, any sequential movement, like rolling a coin or playing a musical instrument, can have lasting plastic changes in the structural organisation of your grey and white matter. So get practicing, and Pete will be back to test you later.
Okay, so don't stress if you found that a bit of a struggle. Nobody ever said changing your brain would be easy. In fact, the tougher you found it, the more likely it is that your brain's actually going to make some changes. So long as you don't give up, that is. I'm going to explore a pioneering neuroscience study that revealed to the world for the very first time the sheer power of brain plasticity. A group of people who physically changed their brains through intensive mental practice and incredible dedication to their training. These people aren't neuroscientists, nor are they memory athletes or professional brain trainers. They are, in fact, London taxi drivers, and I'm off to meet a master. Taxi!
Believe it or not, the humble driver of London's famous black taxis turned out to be key to understanding how brains can refashion their anatomy to meet the demands of the world around us.
You have to learn every street, road, alley, mews, apartment building, train station, hotel, restaurant bars within hotels, absolutely.
For 150 years, taxi drivers have had to take a grueling exam known as the knowledge. It takes most hopefuls over 2 years to master, and it gave scientists at University College London a prime opportunity to look at how the brain adapts when asked to retain a vast amount of information. So I've come to meet an expert who's literally changed the shape of hundreds of people's brains.
Taxi!
Peter Allen is a human sat-nav who's downloaded London's entire road network onto his own brain.
Hello there, how you doing?
And now he helps others to reshape their brains, training them in his super skills.
So how many streets are we actually talking about?
25,000 streets and roads, apartment buildings, pubs, clubs, bars, restaurants, anywhere where someone who puts their hand out for a taxi may want to go.
So how many landmarks is that in total then?
Around 150,000.
What? That must be one of the world's toughest mental challenges.
The scientists suspected that to remember such a vast amount of information, a particular part of the brain well known to be vital for memory and navigation, the hippocampus, might be key. So they scanned their brains at the beginning and end of the process, and comparing the two, found something remarkable.
The discovery of neuroplasticity in the brains of these London taxi drivers was a huge and surprising discovery. The first demonstration of neuroplasticity in the adult brain.
These individuals who have extensive spatial navigation show greater brain volume in their hippocampus, a key region of the brain when it comes to plasticity. There's a lot of work showing, for instance, something called neurogenesis, which is the development or birth of new cells can take place in the hippocampus.
Mastering the knowledge had a physical impact on the brain itself, and their study concluded that part of the hippocampus was indeed larger on average than other people's. In fact, the most dramatic difference was seen in those drivers who had been on the job the longest. So if I want to reshape my brain, Peter could be just the man to teach me how. What I like the most about this piece of neuroscience, which incidentally was literally done just down one of these roads here, is that, in a way, taxi drivers, and especially those who teach the knowledge like Peter, are, without even realising it, neuroscientists. Peter has changed the brains of thousands of people by coaching them through the knowledge. As a result of all of that work, all of that effort, all of that testing and retesting, those Hackney carriage drivers have a slightly larger hippocampus to enable them to navigate this ridiculous spaghetti tangle of a city. So why was this study so groundbreaking? Well, it's proof that the brain keeps changing physically, even when we're older. Hooray! The hippocampus creates and receives long-term memories. It's used to make and then reuse memories of, say, the different possible routes that can get you from one place to another. The research team discovered that the amount of grey matter increased in the rearmost part of the hippocampus as a result of the millions of new connections required for storing and retrieving memories that enable them to navigate around London. It takes most people over 2 years to master the knowledge, and I'm beginning to see why.
Well, this is basically the area you have to learn to complete the knowledge of London. What we have here is a map of London, and the circle around it shows you the 6-mile radius that you have to learn.
It's a massive maze of a metropolis. How can anyone remember every single street?
We've found that the quickest and easiest way is to break it down into sections, and we use quarter-of-a-mile sections to break it down into.
Oh, so that's what these are?
Yeah, and to be honest, this has got something to do with the task I'm about to set you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a certain area of London and get you to learn that. I'm going to tell you to go away for a week, learn as much as you can, and then I'll meet you in a week's time and set you a task and see how much of that area you've learned.
Sounds good.
Okay? The area we're going to focus on is called Soho. We look at that area.
That's tiny.
It's a tiny area.
That's easy.
Yeah, easy. Good. I'm glad you said that. Let's see how you get on.
I'll accept your challenge.
Right.
This sounds good. Do you have any tips, tricks, anything I can use to help me over the next week?
I would say be methodical in what you're doing. You know, make notes. When you're out there, make notes upon notes upon notes. And then go home or come here, study. Any problems, I'll give you a little bit of help. You know, I'm not going to tell you the answers, but I will sort of guide you along the right path. And just, and enjoy it. The more you enjoy it, the easier it will be to learn.
Great advice.
Okay?
I better get cracking.
You better get cracking.
Thanks,
All
Peter.
right.
Challenge accepted. Peter has given me a week to learn every single street in a square mile of central London. Whilst I'm trying to piece the map together in my mind, I should be literally reshaping certain circuits in my brain. And I find that concept remarkable. The insight that brains can change their connections gives us clues as to how the brains of stroke victims or anyone suffering from brain trauma can recover. Jack Martindale has begun his own journey to understand how and why his brain was able to adapt and recover from a near-fatal accident. Jack was left on the brink of death by a car crash that shattered his skull into 30 pieces. But he's defied the odds to write a book, complete his degree, and live an independent life. After the accident, Jack found it hard to come to terms with what happened. It's only now, 7 years on, that he feels ready to try and uncover the reasons behind his miraculous recovery.
At the time of my accident, it was all so raw and so traumatic, really, as it literally is called, that I just didn't have time to, not denial, but I did not want to digest anything that had gone to me. Whereas now, I'm just curious. I want to know as much of my brain as I possibly can.
Jack's come to Oxford University to meet Dr. Charlotte Stagg. Charlotte's an expert in neuroimaging, and she specialises in studying how the brain adapts after injury. One of her areas of specialism is neuroplasticity. Due to all the metal in Jack's skull, it's now impossible to safely scan his brain. But Charlotte's fascinated by the scans that were taken at the time of his accident. And ironically, it's the lack of any major signs of damage that could indicate the real significance of the trauma.
This is one of your brain scans from shortly after your injury. And the problem with these kind of scans is that we can see sort of a cross-section through that, so you can sort of see where it is. But what you can't see is the fine detail of those connections. Okay, so you can sort of see the big cables, but not the individual little wires within them. Sometimes if someone's had a stroke, or for example, you can see a hole or a lesion or something that you can sort of point at and say, that's where the problem is, which means it's why they can't walk properly. But in your case, it's much more likely to be a much more diffuse problem across all of it. And what tends to happen when someone has a bad head injury, like yours, is that you don't get a sort of specific place that's damaged. What you tend to get is damage of the long-range cables, the white matter connections, because they're very long, very thin. Although the brain structure is fine, it's not managing to talk to each other very well.
The nurse at the time, so it was like an office filing cabinet happened to me, being chucked off his down. It was all still there was nothing necessarily gone, it was just the way it was all just ordered, I suppose.
Yes, everything's still there, all the connections are basically still there. They're just not working very well.
Yeah. Okay.
And the process that you've been through since then is, reordering that filing cabinet.
That's what,
learning to reconnect the right connections to allow you to do what it is you want to do.
The human brain contains billions of neurons that govern communication between the brain and the body. Everything that we do, think or feel is controlled by these microscopically thin cells. They communicate by sending electrochemical signals to one another via long nerve fibers called axons. These thread-like neurons link up to form complex networks all across the brain, known as nerve tracts or pathways, that ferry trillions of electrical impulses every moment of every day.
The scale of neuroplasticity can be incredibly staggering. Really clear examples of this can be people who have quite widespread brain injury but then recover function afterwards. So for example, people can have damage to really core regions involved in language, but then over time they can recover because they're picking up other brain regions that might be helpful.
Recovery is a really interesting thing, and it happens in a lot of different ways. What we know from Jack, for example, is that the individual parts of the brain were functioning pretty normally, we think, but actually the connections between them had been really badly damaged. And one of the really interesting things about Jack's recovery is that those pathways reformed as a result of all that intensive therapy he was doing. The brain found new connections and strengthened them, which allowed him to recover and walk again, for example.
Was my age on my side? I was 21. Was there not some blessing in disguise, the fact that I was so young?
Yeah, so there's certainly this sort of saying of you can't teach an old dog new tricks. You can teach an old dog new tricks, it just takes longer, okay? So everybody can learn, everybody can, all our brains are doing this all the time. But it is true, I'm afraid, that the younger you are, usually the quicker it happens.
Now that Jack has a deeper understanding of the processes behind his recovery, Charlotte's keen to make sure that his ever-changing brain continues to adapt.
I think now's a really good time to be a neuroscientist. So we're understanding more and more about how the brain recovers, neuroplasticity every day. The techniques are coming on, so MR imaging, allowing us to really understand what's happening in the brain as people relearn and recover function after an injury. And we're developing new ways of trying to help that.
It's been quite a day of revelations for Jack.
I learned a lot. Overwhelmed, actually. The most amazing thing today that I learned about my brain was the whole very concept of neuroplasticity and how you're always learning and things are always adaptable. That was really reassuring because it's just important to remember, I think, that the brain can always improve.
When you're recovering from brain injury, this process is actually, in many ways, even more incredible than just regular learning, because often you've got a brain area that's doing its function, but it no longer works. So you've got to reroute, you've got to start to direct connections in different directions, and you've got to have other brain regions starting to do something new. So you can't rely on the old, it's almost very much the new, and in that that sense, it's a much grander scale of recovery. It can take a lot more time, but when you see the outcomes, just incredible.
It's absolutely amazing. Having read Jack's notes from the time of his injury before meeting him, it is incredible to see how far he's come. It was a real testament to his dedication and determination to do that, but also to the power of the brain to be able to recover with that much input.
Jack is a genuine inspiration. Coming up, I'll be taking a look at how fast neuroplasticity can work its magic.
I'm genuinely shocked that my brain could change overnight.
But first, I've been finding out how being a London cabbie can also grow new connections in your brain. A week ago, taxi trainer Peter Allen set me the task of memorising every road in an area of central London. I've spent every spare moment I can trying to make a mental map of the streets, routes and landmarks, but has it been enough?
Now, it may be just 1 square mile, but there are dozens and dozens of streets, lanes, squares, all sorts of cut-throughs, not to mention the landmarks and a dizzying one-way system. Now, despite my best efforts, I don't really feel like much has sunk in, but you never know. Maybe my brain has retained more than I realise. Hello, Peter.
Hi, Jack. Good to see you again. You all right?
Yeah, very well, thanks. What challenge have you got in store for me today?
I want you to take me from Berwick Street to Soho Square. Now, a cabbie would be able to do that journey in around using about 15 streets.
To be honest, Gov, from here to Soho Square, you might as well walk.
Well, that's true, but that's not what the task is today. So, there you are, Mr. Cabbie.
Yeah.
Take me to Soho Square.
All right, hop in.
Thank you very much.
As if this wasn't stressful enough, my passenger is a master of the knowledge, and he's not letting me off easily.
OK, so we're on street number 1, Berwick Street.
Number 1 is Berwick Street. Hang on, Soho Square's right there.
Yeah, but we can't get to it that way.
Oh.
Come on, cabbie, the meter's ticking.
Now, you don't actually have to move an inch to drive positive plastic change in your brain. MRI scans have revealed that just thinking about playing a piece of music can rewire the brain of a musician just as much as actually practicing. So I'm hoping that even though this is my first time at the wheel of a black cab, that the hard work is already done. All my efforts should already have shaped my brain.
Time is ticking.
But my brain appears to be disappointingly unchanged.
Oh no, that would have been a great idea. Okay, this is not good. This is failure on a plate. Sorry, I'm new. Sorry.
Okay, so here's the problem with plasticity. The initial changes are only temporary. Your brain tries out the new skill, but only makes a permanent change to accommodate it if the outcome is useful and important enough. So, have you been practicing Pete's tasks? Can you roll a coin on your fingers yet? If you can this time tomorrow, you've just rewired your brain. If you can't, your brain's probably decided it's just not important enough. But don't tell Pete. He'll get upset.
The way in which the brain creates new pathways is often through principles of association. And there's a common phrasing, which is what fires together, wires together. So if you have 2 cells in the brain that regularly fire together, they correlate in their outcome, then what you see over time is that connection strengthens and the pathway between them builds.
Why wouldn't you let me go on the Regent Street?
Well, whilst you've been reshaping your brains by learning new skills, mine has come to a dead end. It's been 25 minutes and I'm stuck in traffic.
Oh, by the way, you're on street number 24 at the minute.
Yeah.
So I don't want to rub it in.
It's all right, I stopped the meter, you're fine.
You haven't stopped time now, have you? So I'm very late at the moment.
If I've learnt anything, and it clearly isn't how to navigate around Soho yet, it's that brain plasticity is very much a two-way street. The more you put in, the more you get out.
You do see changes in brain structure across the brain though, so learning other skills might change other brain regions. For instance, visual learning can change brain structure in the visual system. Motor learning can change the motor system. So this principle of learning, changing your brain structure is evident across the brain, not just in the one single region.
On the left, we have the townhouse, Warner Brothers.
You're on the wrong side of the road, Jack.
Oh, I'm on the wrong side.
Two-way street, yeah, yeah. Do you know what, cabbie? Pull over and let me out. I'll walk the rest of the way.
Finally, after a lot of wrong turns and some fairly distracted driving, I've made it to Soho Square. I'm pretty sure I failed.
It only took me half an hour to drive a 5-minute walk.
Absolutely right. I need to have a shave because I've grown a beard in the amount of time it's taken you. But it was, you know, it was good fun. And you was a good cabbie, good company. You kept talking all along the way.
It just goes to show that there's a reason Peter trains taxi drivers for over 2 years before they can get their licences. But I had hoped that in 1 week I could remember at least 1 square mile and give my hippocampus just a little boost. But it's back to the drawing board for me.
There you go, sir. Back to the rightful owner.
Well, Jack, the task was get me from Berwick Street to Soho Square using 15 streets. You used 29 streets and you got me here in just under 30 minutes. OK?
I'm so ashamed.
You have failed this part of the knowledge.
And I had a sneaky little leg up by being a Londoner in the first place, and
Absolutely.
I still failed.
Common mistake, that's where everyone goes wrong. But, you know, come to Knowledge Point School, 2.5 years, I could have you driving one of these. It's been an absolute pleasure.
All right, nice.
Thanks a
Cheers.
lot.
I'll go...
Bus stop's that way.
Well, sadly, I failed. Abject failure when it came to rising to Peter's challenge, but looking on the bright side for a moment, I did manage to get him here eventually. Now, if you think about it, 25,000 roads, 150,000 landmarks. It would only take me 2.5 years to fundamentally reshape my hippocampus to navigate this huge and ancient city. I think that is true testimony to the incredible nature of brain plasticity.
So, what have we learnt so far? Well, our brains are definitely able to change and adapt. And whilst we may not all have Jack's remarkable neuroplasticity, even my old brain should be able to rewire.
Do you know what, cabbie? Pull over and let me out. I'll walk the rest of the way.
There you go, sir.
If only I was better at studying my A to Z.
Well, Jack.
So underestimate your brain at your peril. You can adapt your brain to do remarkable things, as my old friend Mr. Pete Heat is very keen to point out.
Julia, in a minute, you're going to show us a magic trick.
Me?
You're going to do it.
Okay.
Yeah. How does that make you feel? You into it?
Yeah, I'm into
Let's
it.
do it. All right, so I'm going to spread you there so you can see they are all different. And we're going to mix them up as well. And I'm going to get you to do the same. You don't have to do exactly that shuffle,
Okay.
but yeah, can you mix them up for me just so you know I haven't put them in any specific order? I'm going to get you to choose one first of all. Okay, so if I flick through there and just, basically, if you just jam your finger in somewhere as they go, I'll go quite slowly so you've got lots of time, lots of places to
Thank
choose.
you.
And wherever you want to put them, oh, right there, are you
Yeah,
sure?
yeah.
Okay, slide it towards you slightly and just have a little look at what it is and put it up a bit more if you need to see.
Okay, yeah.
You happy?
Mhm.
So I've been doing this since I was, genuinely since I was about 6 or 7 years old. I've been doing it for a long time. But you haven't, right?
No.
Okay. I'm going to give you the power to know where any card in the pack is, and you're just going to have to trust me that it's going to work, okay?
Okay.
So I'm going to give you the pack. Okay. Now, somewhere in there is a card that is the card that you're thinking of, right?
Mhm.
You genuinely don't know where it is?
No.
Okay. Now you do. Right. I'm going to get you to just deal cards face down onto the table one at a time. So don't turn them over just yet. Just deal into a pile, one at a time on top of each other, and just keep going. And basically, the idea is you just stop whenever it feels right. Okay. You're the magician now.
I'm really scared. I don't want to get this wrong.
It's all right. You won't. You're a magician now. You've learnt the skill.
Okay.
Is that it? Is that it? That's how you
So,
stop. Okay.
this
Well, you know
one.
what? Let's keep a bit of suspense. You've stopped on this card. Are you telling me this is your card?
Yes.
Let's move it slightly out of the way so we can see. I'm not. That's the last I'm going to touch that. If you'd have stopped one card earlier, by the way, it would have been this one here, the 5 of hearts. That's
Okay.
not your card, right?
No.
If you'd have stopped one card later, if you'd have just dealt this one, it would have been the 8 of diamonds. That's not yours
No.
either. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. But you didn't stop on either of those two. You stopped on this exact card here.
Okay.
What's the card you're thinking of?
9 diamond.
The 9 of diamonds.
Oh my god. I knew I was magic.
No. Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, that's pretty damn cool.
How did you do
That's
it?
really cool. I have no idea. Wow.
You have the power.
I know.
So well done, you're now a magician. Use your powers for good.
Yes, I will.
I literally don't know what to say. I was just amazed. Like, I honestly thought I honestly thought I was going to get it wrong and I was going to, like, show him up.
I felt like I was in control, but still that I wasn't. Like, I don't know how to, like, describe it because I'm not used to it, you know, but it was a really cool experience. I'm actually just completely baffled. When someone says you have the power now, you kind of have to believe them, but that is still, I'm just like, I'm baffled. That's it. That's all I've got.
I'm just completely speechless.
That's magic.
It's magic.
Clearly.
So, if Pete can help anyone unlock their inner magician, can I unleash the full potential of my brain to rapidly adapt to new circumstances? Now, yes, I may have failed utterly in my first attempt, but there's one pioneering researcher out there who believes it can be done, and with very little effort on my part.
Meet Dr. James Kolosinski. Dr. Kolosinski is a man on a mission. He believes that it's far easier to manipulate your brain than most neuroscientists would have you believe. All he needs is a brave volunteer and some superglue to make his point. Anyone? Okay, that'll be me. James has developed a clever experiment to show how quickly the brain can adapt to changes in our bodies.
So what have you got in store for me today?
We're going to try to manipulate your brain to change by changing how you use your hands, so in this case gluing your fingers together, and we'll leave you like that for 24 hours and see what happens.
All right, whatever you say, Doc.
We're going to start off with an MRI scan of your brain to start with, and then we're going to do some behavioural testing as well. So the first thing I need you to do for the MRI scan is to go and get changed into these lovely scrubs for me.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. You just head over there and get changed for me. I'll see you in a second.
Okay, thank you.
Brilliant.
Cheers.
By gluing my fingers together, James is going to see if the brain reacts to this physiological change. But to test this, he first needs to see how brains manage finger movement before the glue goes on.
So what we're going to have you doing in the scan is moving your fingers individually to activate the regions of the brain that correspond to each of your fingers, from your index through to your little finger. And from that, we can start looking at how those are organised relative to each other, and maybe then think about how they might change once we've glued your fingers together later on.
Sweet.
Each finger is coordinated by a very specific area in the brain, and James can map this when each finger is moved one by one.
And now the middle. And your ring finger now.
Next up, I have to perform a bunch of behavioural tests.
And what you're going to feel is two kind of stimuli, a little bit kind of like a vibration, like your mobile phone might vibrate. And what we need you to do is, using the foot pedals down there on the floor, is judge which one came first.
This will help James determine how good my brain is at responding to the touch through my fingers.
So I think it's done.
Yeah.
What's the next step?
So now it's the moment of truth in terms of gluing your fingers together.
A bit I really haven't been looking forward to.
So it's clinical skin glue, so it's the kind of thing that you would use in kind of cuts and lacerations if you went into A&E, for example. It dries pretty quickly. It's pretty flexible stuff, so you should be able to bend and flex your fingers still, but it will keep them firmly stuck together for the next 24 hours. Great.
By gluing my index and middle fingers together, James is literally changing my body's physiology.
Right, so if you put those fingers shut for me there.
Two become one. Oh, it's going to be really weird. Okay, well, I guess I'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
No worries.
Okay, now here comes the tough bit. James wants me to try and use my newly glued hand as much as possible for the next 24 hours. Easier said than done. Think of a skill that's been perfectly mapped onto your brain by plasticity, like tying your shoes. When you were a kid, you had to think through each step. Now, your brain does it on autopilot. It's not really muscle memory. Muscles don't actually store any memories. It's down to the hardwired connections formed in your brain as you learnt. Want to try another technique? Well, most of us learnt to tie our shoes in one of two ways. The round the tree technique, or the bunny ears. But a specialist has proven the best way of tying laces is the Ian knot. Simply form 2 loops and pull them through each other. It's the fastest, securest knot in town. See how long it takes your brain to memorize that skill. But of course, Pete has a quicker, magical method. I've embarked on my own mission to invoke a little bit of neuroplasticity in my brain. For the past 24 hours, I've had my fingers glued together, all in the name of science. Can changing my body's physiology really lead to a physical change in my brain? Now, I wouldn't recommend gluing 2 fingers together, but funnily enough, after a while, you do kind of get used to it. 24 hours later, and I'm back at the university to learn what it might have done to my brain.
First things first, I want this off.
Absolutely.
Yay! Freedom.
So, with the glue taken off, James then runs the same behavioural tests as yesterday. Then he does a second scan. But could there really have been a brain change in such a short time? Time for some results.
So what we're looking at in this study is how that overlap changes before and after the gluing.
Fantastic.
First up, James shows me a brain scan from before the fingers were glued together.
What did you find?
When we glued together these 2 fingers, something quite surprising actually ends up happening. Rather than changes in these 2 fingers that we've glued together, the changes happen in the fingers that we haven't manipulated. The ring finger starts functioning more independent of the middle finger here,
right,
and starts functioning more in synergy, so more together with the pinky finger.
Oh,
so
that's
it seems
interesting.
So what we've done in gluing together these 2 fingers is actually freed your ring finger to go off and have a new role of its own.
That makes sense. My ring finger definitely had to work harder over the last 24 hours. But could it have actually created a physical change in the brain?
So this is the representation of someone's
Okay.
ring finger at baseline.
Right. And then?
Okay, so then if we rescan them again after the gluing.
In just 24 hours?
So you've got this kind of shift going on there.
It's so fast. I'm genuinely shocked that my brain could change how it looks after something as important as the fingers in my hand overnight. It just doesn't seem long enough.
So the thing that we've really uncovered here, which no one's seen before, is the speed, the rapidity of that plasticity. So how fast can your brain really change? So lots of people have looked at plasticity over a period of months or years, but no one's really sought how quickly can the brain change over the very short term. And that's really what we found in this study.
That's brilliant. Now I understand why you've got your own lab in this amazing facility. Great work.
Thank you.
It's amazing.
So, there you have it. Even my old brain can change overnight. Remarkable. So, go try out a new skill. Go somewhere new. Be open to new experiences. And you might just be building up the connections in your brain.